We do whatever it takes. We want to play great. We want to make the music sound great. And this is the price of admission. Greetings and welcome to this first lesson in a group of lessons that Acoustic Guitar Magazine and I are putting together regarding playing classical music on a classical guitar. If you haven't thought about it, classical means it's got these kind of plasticky strings that sound amazing and basses that are wrapped in metal but are nylon string inside, and they sound amazing. So it's a reason to play this repertoire on this guitar. Our problem is, how do we play the piece that you just heard, or any piece, an arpeggio piece, in a way that makes it smooth, legato, connected, and all those kind of wonderful, gooey things that we like about the guitar, or any music. When I say legato, of course, legato means that every note connects to every other note sequentially. Whatever happened last has to keep going until the next thing happens, and we don't want to have. Now we can do that on purpose, or we can do it accidentally. What we have to do is try and watch out for the accidentally part. So our intention is to play incredibly legato. Okay, there's a technique of how to increase the chances that that can happen, and we're going to talk about that in some depth. We're using Carulli Prelude 1 from his set of pieces called 24 Preludes, Opus 114. Carulli was a 19th century guitarist, virtuoso, and composer. And these 24 preludes are actually arpeggio studies. Arpeggio meaning that we have a chord. We're not going to play it as a chord. We're going to play it in succession, as you heard earlier. The way that this works has a lot to do with what we call orchestration. Every piece has, if we have a contrapuntal or polyphonic piece where there's more than one voice happening at a time, there's a bass voice, and there's a tenor voice, and an alto voice, and a soprano voice. And you could call them 1, 2, 3, and 4. It doesn't matter. Those words take a long time to say. But if we think about each of the voices being separate entities, and we try to make our left hand support that, then we can end up sort of succeeding at what our problem is now, and make it sound smooth, legato, and beautiful. This is going to succeed or fail on two things that we have to accept, well, two things that I'd like you to accept about how to play guitar, especially with arpeggio studies, although it works for everything. Number one, don't put down fingers you don't need. And you're thinking, well, what does that mean? Well, okay, we know the first measure is C, and that's a C chord. However, this finger isn't written. It's not used in this particular measure, so I'm not going to put it down. The second measure is a G7 chord over a D bass. Well, we don't need all that. We just need this. Next one is C over E. Don't need the C bass. I'm not going to play it. And back to the G7 chord, another C chord without the second finger, and then an E7 over B. We don't need all this stuff. We don't want to play this way because he wrote this. And then A minor, don't need that note. And then this, which is a A7, and then a D minor over A. So it's not this, it's this. D, F, A. And then G7 again, this time with a G bass. But we're not going to put the B down because we're not playing it. And then back to C, and then to D minor over F, and then C over G, no C bass, it's just G. And then G7, and then C. It's kind of incredible. I mean, when I first learned about this, it was like, wow. Because the bottom line is, it's easier to play 2 fingers than 3, or 1 than 2. And so why should we use energy we don't need? Also, it interrupts the flow of the music because it's putting a heavier load on our hand, and we don't want to work harder than we have to. Okay, the second thing that we need to apply to our new technique is, we've already covered don't put a finger down you don't need. Secondly, don't put a finger down that you do need until you need it. So if you were playing, for instance, the beginning of the Well-Tempered Clavier Prelude by Bach, you wouldn't go, it is a C chord, just like the piece that we're working on now. You would put this down, and then this, and then open, and then the first finger will go down. And then it goes to the D minor over C, and you'd play C, then you would play open D, that comes off, and then you put that down, then that down, and that. Now, what's the reason for this? Again, it's more efficient because it's less time spent pushing down, which adds up over time, and it doesn't disturb the voices. Don't forget, we've got bass, alto, soprano, tenor, alto, soprano. And we'd like to keep them organized in our head so that we know what note's playing who. And why would you want to know that? It just it holds our whole attention better. And we can organize and we can execute in a much more efficient manner. There was a great term by a great pedagogue, Aaron Shearer, who's no longer on the planet, but he constantly spoke about playing without confusion and error. And I'd love to coin his term because you simply can't say it better than that. If we're playing arpeggio and we want to hang on to our concentration and really hang on to what's going on the guitar, in the music, in our ears, if we can think about these voices, it will limit the amount of confusion and error. Because if you just think, oh, I'm throwing this down, your right hand won't necessarily be kind of mandated to play the right strings. So if we know that's playing, and now we know first finger on the second string is playing, it makes a better connection for the right hand fingers to know when to play and where to play. And this is subtle, and I know you've been playing great without this, but when you have this, it's going to raise your level of concentration, of execution. Your game is going to raise it, I promise. And it's going to sound more beautiful, connected, and legato. So I'm going to go through the whole piece very slowly, and I'm going to play just the way I told you. I'm going to play only the fingers I need. I'm going to play only the fingers I need when I need them. Here we go. Yeah, that was smooth, and it was legato, and it was beautiful, and mission accomplished. Problem solved. Almost. Now I'm going to throw in a third thing. We want to not put fingers down we don't need. Don't put down fingers you need until you need them. Finally, this has to do with the orchestration thing with the bass, tenor, alto, soprano. we'd like to hold on to the notes in each one of those voices until the note changes in each voice. In other words, we have bass, alto, soprano, tenor, alto, soprano, bass, alto, soprano, tenor, alto, soprano. Now the bass changes from C to D, so I'm going to take it off and play the D. Now the alto, which is holding C still, is going to go to open B. So then I'm going to take it off then, and then finally the soprano needs an F. It's been playing E, and now I'm going to put that down. Let's do one more. The next one is the bass changes to E, which covers up the open D, so I don't have to worry about it except put the E down. And then the open B goes to a C. I'll put that down then. Sorry. And then the G, bass, alto, soprano, bass, alto, soprano. Now, one more. This goes to open D, C goes to B in the alto, and the G is going to go to F. Tenor, soprano. I gotta go one more because here's where it gets a little tricky. Bass, alto, soprano. So let's look at one more change to try and really bring home this point about the third thing, about not taking notes off until their voice changes to its next note. It's the A7 to D minor over A. It goes bass, alto, soprano, tenor, alto, soprano, bass, alto, soprano, tenor, alto, soprano. Now, there's another A bass, and it's an A in the alto, and then there's a D in soprano. Now we have an F. The point is, even though it's an unusual fingering, we don't really care about fingering things in the same way from piece to piece. We want to finger them in a way that supports the orchestration and that makes the fingers go down when they're needed, not go down until they're needed, and hopefully stay until they're not needed. Okay. There's one more thing that makes this a little more complicated, and you can stop with just number one if you want, because that was already such an improvement in anybody's playing. There's a couple places where you can't hold down a voice until it changes, because that finger is called upon to play something else. In other words, we've got this G7 chord over D. This is a soprano. First finger. When it changes back to C, there's the bass, no problem. Now we need an alto note on C, which is right here. We can't hold this guy down any longer. He's got to get off and go here. Even though his voice doesn't change until the soprano, which is the third note in the arpeggio. So we have to go. Without a buzz would be nice. So we shortchanged the soprano note, and we changed it 1/8 note sooner than we'd like to. No one's going to hear it. But it's important. I mean, I do it, and yeah, you'll hear it. You'll hear it. But you won't mind. Finally, there's one more piece of this puzzle, and we can do something about the problem I just described, where you're going to cut a voice short because the finger who's on it has to go to a different voice before that voice changes. In other words, triplet number 2 gets preference over the finger and triplet number 3, which is a soprano. Remember, bass is on triplet 1, alto on triplet 2, and soprano on the third note of the triplets. The note is required on 2 when it should have stayed till 3, but that's okay. And here's a way to kind of work around it. I've got this going on. Now I can put this down. Did you catch that? Observe. So the F stayed all the way until it was E, even though I had to sort of creeper the finger over. And I do this kind of trick a lot. Still pressure's down. I'm on the B string now. It's kind of a mini bar. And then when that note plays, I'll pop the hinge bar off. It is a hinge bar. You know, if you haven't done a hinge bar, it's where you don't do the whole bar. You just do strings that you need, but sometimes you need to bar these, and you still need an open E, so the finger's kind of bent backwards. I guess you can see it over there too. We do whatever it takes. We want to play great. We want to make the music sound great, and this is the price of admission. So thanks for listening, for playing along, and for considering these ideas. I promise they're going to make you have more fun, even though you might be frustrated once or twice, and play better. Because we always have more fun when we're doing something so hard that it captures our brain and it won't let it go. Speaking of brains, I'm going to go work on some Bach now. That prelude that I mentioned earlier. And I'm going to not move any fingers. I'm not going to put any fingers down until I need them. No, I'm not going to put any fingers down that I don't need, and I'm not going to put them down before I need them. And if I need to do that cheat thing, I'll do that too. See you next time.